Okay, so welcome everybody to the mindfulness part of this webinar. I'm going to give you some demonstrations of mindfulness practices and explain a little bit about how it all works, so feel free to ask any questions as we go along. So mindfulness, the importance of mindfulness in terms of resiliency is it's a practice and a skill that enhances awareness and self-regulation and steadiness of mind. So that aids awareness of when you're getting stressed, and then you can use it to become less stressed, that's the resiliency part, and also how to recover from stress to prevent burnout. So over the next few slides we'll be just doing a few little demonstrations, and feel free to ask any questions as we go along. So just this next slide just explains a little bit about how mindfulness is a core resiliency skill. It's sort of a container of resiliency. If you're aware of how you're getting stressed, you can do something about it, and then you can put in place various little skills to make yourself less stressed. Okay, so it's what we call the container of mindfulness. So I'm going to ask you to do a little experiment in a minute, and what this involves is just closing your eyes or softening your gaze. So if you don't want to close your eyes, you can soften your gaze, and just maintain your attention on one thought that you've had recently for about 30 seconds. So nothing else. So the whole sort of instruction is just to hold that one thought in mind. So it could be a thought about a recent conversation, what you had for breakfast this morning, or something that just came up during the day, and just see if you can hold that thought in mind for about 30 seconds and see what happens, and not to think about anything else. And then about after 30 seconds I'll be asking you to then clear your mind of all thoughts. So this is a way of learning a little bit about mindfulness and how the mind works. And in that 30 seconds I want to mind free any thoughts that you were just thinking about. Does that make sense? Everyone ready to go? All right, so when you're ready, just closing your eyes or softening your gaze, and see if it's possible to maintain your attention on one thought over the next 30 seconds. So it could be a recent conversation, a meeting or activity. Just notice what bubbles up and see if you can just hold that thought in mind with nothing else. So just that one thought. So letting go of any sounds or other sensations, just being aware of that one particular thought. And notice what happens. You're doing very well. So now when you're ready, see if you can now let that thought go and erase that thought and any related thoughts from your mind, and just for the next 20 seconds have a mind full of blank thoughts, so no thoughts whatsoever, so a blank mind, a thought-free mind for the next 20 seconds. So when you're ready, go. Okay, when you're ready, you can open your eyes now, and just noticing any after effects of completing that little practice. What do people notice? What do you think?
That it's very difficult to think of nothing.
Very difficult to think of nothing?
Okay.
So that was the second part. What about the first part? So I'll come back to the second part. Is it okay to ask what about the first part? Were you able to find a thought?
I tried to find a thought, a really precise thing, but it kept on going all over the place. Mm-hmm. And then I was hearing sounds in here, and then a fly landed on my foot. Mm-hmm. And so I found it really difficult.
So a fairly distracted mind. It's very hard to keep your mind on one thing only.
Yeah.
Similar things?
Yeah.
I had one point, but then I kept trying to jump back to it because I kept going off and thinking of other things.
Thinking of other things, yes.
Yeah, it's, everything just comes in. You can't
just block it out. It's not easy to block it out. Yeah, it takes a bit of work. And then in the second half, that we were trying to sort of blank your mind, how did you go with that?
Pretty awful.
Pretty awful?
Yeah,
pretty,
so lots of sort of things popping in, thoughts and sort of stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just a little experiment on how the mind works. And really what's happening is we can spend a lot of our day in this sort of mode where our mind is jumping all over the place, and it's hard to hold in mind any one particular thing, just depending on the stimulus or whatever's distracting us from time to time. It's what we call our default mode, this chattering mind. So yes, you can bring up a thought, but then other thoughts intrude. They sort of layer on top of it. It connects off to other places, or you distract yourself with other things. We don't intend to do that. It just happens automatically, and it's often very useful too, by the way. So it's called the autopilot. So our brain is very much on a sort of autopilot mode, where it's sort of thinking about lots of different things, and then it'll get caught up on one train of thought, goes for a while on that, and then it gets distracted on another train of thought, and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily wrong, it's just an automatic way that the mind works. It likes to think, and it likes to jump around all the time. Now the problem is that if we get sort of too stressed, it actually gets worse. It gets more automatic, and it tends to start following in a certain direction, usually a negative direction. And this autopilot is based on old habits, memories and feelings. So even though you may be intending to go a certain way, the mind gets hijacked by other thoughts based on our memories and feelings or mood that we're currently experiencing. So obviously if we're in a bad mood, our negative thinking pattern can start going to a negative direction. That can have a big impact on our mood and ultimately on our habitual behaviour, because we start to react to situations based on memories rather than a clear and present awareness of what is actually going on. So that's the danger of autopilot. In many situations when you're feeling relaxed, autopilot's great. You know, you can be cooking a meal or working at the kitchen or doing something, vacuuming the floor, and you can be thinking about a lot of different things. And in a way, it's actually probably useful to have autopilot because it helps you remember what you could be doing. So that's why we think the brain likes to go into autopilot mode, because it's sort of filtering out information that could be useful, and it's sort of bringing it to your mind to see, oh, do I want to think about that, or do I want to think about this, or maybe this is more important. But the problem is if we're not mentally aware of that, that's the mindfulness part, you can't do anything to sort of correct it in some way and respond in a more intentional type of manner. And it's a particular problem when you're feeling really stressed or you're tired or fatigued. You've got less control over your mind, and so you tend to go very habitual. Okay, so why do we need to know that? So mindfulness is allowing us to learn how to step out of this automatic pilot mode. It's about helping us to self-regulate our behaviour, and in the previous exercise where we did 3 sighs, we're learning how to release any unnecessary tension. So if I know I'm in a scattered mode, I might be able to do something about it, especially if it's causing me to tense up and get sort of reactive or stressed. So if we can, if you like, step out of automatic pilot, that's the skill of mindfulness, learning how to step out of automatic pilot. We can then optimise the way we're responding to situations. We may be able to drop our level of physical arousal so we're not so stressed. That could then save a lot of energy throughout the day. So you're not running around sort of really scattered and stressed. And then you can have a greater clarity in thinking so that you can make decisions about what's happening that's less based on our old habits and judgments and reactions type of thing. Okay. And ultimately, especially when we know we're stressed, this idea of we're learning how to look at our thoughts and realise that maybe we're perceiving a threat in a situation, we're perceiving that something's going to go wrong, and it's really based on automatic pilot and our mood rather than on a good, accurate appraisal of the situation. Okay. So now we're going to learn how do we step out of automatic pilot. That's the next little bit. So that's the next slide. We're shifting to mindfulness of posture. So one way of learning how to step out of automatic pilot mode is to just be aware of your body. So what I'm going to get you to do is to sit as you are now. Don't want you to do anything. Just stay where you are. And in a few moments, I'll ask you to adjust your posture to a more comfortable position. So the first part of the practice will be to notice how you're sitting, then to notice if it feels comfortable or not comfortable, and then to adjust your posture to a more comfortable position. Is that okay? Are people ready to do that? So it's a little mindfulness exercise. So when you're ready, okay, the first step is just check in on the inside. So bring attention to your posture, the way you're sitting, any physical sensations. And notice how you're sitting, whether it feels comfortable or not comfortable, if there's a part of your body where there is some sort of discomfort. And see if you can make a choice about how you want to adjust your posture. and then when you're ready, make a decision to adjust your posture. So you're ready, you can go now, you can make a decision to just adjust your posture. And just notice how that feels. So what tells you on the inside for sitting more comfortably. Okay, so how do people go with that? So that was the exercise, very simple exercise. Were people aware they were sort of any discomfort or just wasn't quite right? Wasn't going
When
right?
you said it, I immediately realised the back of my knees were tight, the way I was sitting, but only when you sort of pointed it out.
Yep.
So now I've stretched them out, so it's a lot more comfortable. Yeah, I wasn't aware I was doing it.
And so, is it okay, Claire, what part, when you sort of adjusted your posture and now it's more relaxed, how do you know it's more relaxed? What tells you it's more relaxed? What's the difference?
The tight muscles behind my knees aren't tight anymore.
So there's a
They're
lack of
loose.
tightness, there's
Yeah,
a looseness there. So that's a looseness. So that's a
softness.
feeling of what relaxation feels like. Usually relaxation feels like a loose feeling. And if we're mindful, we can notice the difference between tension or holding a particular tension in the body and relaxation, and we get better at noticing. So that's why a very simple mindfulness exercise you can practice every day, very frequently, is how am I sitting? What's my posture like? Can I adjust it? Okay. Other people, anything they noticed about that? How those?
Mine was just my posture in general. Like I'd noticed my lower back was a bit sore, but then my spine was digging in the chair. So I should sit up straight, so then my spine's straight. So then it's comfortable.
Oh yeah. So, and then you made a decision to adjust it?
Yep.
And it feels better?
Yeah, it does.
Oh, good. So, simple little things. Now, why do you think, this is the next question I'm going to ask people, why do you think you didn't notice it before?
Not thinking of it.
Not thinking of
Not
it?
really aware of it.
Not where you're aware of it? Yeah.
Yeah, concentrating more on what's going on around rather than what's
Okay.
happening with yourself.
Yeah, so sort of thinking about what I was talking about, obviously, and sort of mulling that over in your mind. And obviously we were talking about other things as well before we even started this exercise. And it took attention away from your body. So mindfulness is learning to bring attention to your body. So if you want to step out of automatic pilot, one of the ways of doing that is to say, well, what's happening in my body at the moment? Just that little instruction or encouragement to yourself will help you shift a little bit away from your thoughts, which is what's going on usually about, that's the automatic pilot part, to what am I feeling in my body? As soon as I switch attention, so it's an attentional shift, I start to pick up little things and notice little things.
The more you're talking, now I'm aware of my stomach. That's tight, so I'm having to shift that now because I'm totally focused on that now.
So, and that's the beauty, so it's the power of mindfulness, is its simplicity in a way. If we're not noticing what's going on the inside, that's the physical aspect of our experience, then we're more likely to hold those little tensions or those postures throughout the day, and then we get home and at the end of the day we go, oh dear, why is my back hurting, why is my neck hurting, why are my feet aching? Right. So it's a beautiful little way of relaxing the body and sharpening the mind and stepping out of that autopilot. Of course you'll go back into autopilot, and that's okay too, but we're sort of training ourselves to notice we're in autopilot, what's happening in my body, can I make a little adjustment? Okay, what's the next thing? Okay, so thanks for that. So what are we doing here? This is the next slide. I've just shifted to the next slide. Mindfulness is about stepping out of automatic pilot. It's shifting from the thinking mode to the sensing mode. So even though there'll be still thoughts bubbling up while you're doing that exercise, I imagine there probably were, we're giving more attention to the sensing part of our experience. And when we give more attention to the sensing part, we start to notice details. Those details then inform us, oh, back's a bit sore, oh, I need to adjust my posture. Also, it's intentional, so I was sort of encouraging you to do it. So it's sort of like learning how to encourage yourself to choose to sort of focus on sensations. We're cultivating this sort of curiosity about observing our experience and noticing the little differences. It's called the noticing mode of mind, another way of putting it. And we're also, this is sort of the sort of next layer of mindfulness, is learning to cultivate a sort of more open and accepting attitude to our experience. So just to be curious about what's going on without necessarily getting sort of judgmental about it. So I don't know, did anyone notice when they sort of noticed a bit of soreness or discomfort, did they have a little judgmental thought? Yeah, and Any type of judgment or thought?
Yeah, something along the lines of always sit too tightly.
Yeah. So you gave yourself a little bit of a reprimand or something like that, a little
Yeah, yeah.
reprimand. Come on, come on, you should always like this, come on, you should. So we notice that's a little mental reaction to the discomfort, and we notice it may be habitual, and then mindfulness learning to be curious about that mental story, whatever it is, and decide, can we sort of let it go and not buy into the story so much? We know it's there, we're good at noticing it, but we're not actually sort of allowing space for that story rather than overreacting to the story. Because obviously if you overreact to the story, you jump back onto the sort of thought train and you start to think again. And then we start thinking. So it's a sort of a subtle sort of skill here we're learning. Okay. So now what we want to do is develop our practice a little bit further. So they're very informal practices. The 3 sighs is a little informal practice, and being aware of postures is an informal practice. Being aware of your breath is an informal practice. But we can now start training ourselves to be more mindful more regularly throughout the day by doing what we call formal practices. So it's like going to the mindfulness gym. So yes, you can have good intentions about practicing exercise, but it's not until you go to the gym and do some repetitions or whatever that you can build up your muscles type of thing. So this is the same with mindfulness. We all have a capacity to be mindful. You were mindful in that little exercise, you notice little differences and little sorenesses and discomforts. But now how can we increase our capacity or our skill level at mindfulness in a more formal way? So we do a practice. So this next practice, called mindfulness of body and breath, is a formal way of shifting from the thinking mode to the sensing mode. It'll go for maybe 8 or 9 minutes. It's not a very long practice. Obviously we could do it much longer. But it's just a brief way of learning how to practice to come into the present moment and be aware of what you're experiencing inside. So people open to this little practice? You've got time? You think you can do it? All right, okay. So it's one of the first and most fundamental mindfulness practices. If you ever go on a course, you'll be learning this type of practice. So the first thing to do is to find a posture that gives you a sense of being alert and being aware. So maybe sitting in a comfortable position. It's preferable to have your feet flat on the floor, arms in a comfortable position, however you want to place your hand in this. Usually a good way to start is to wriggle around on the chair. Just do a little bit of a wriggle. Helps you become more aware of your body, and then you'll settle on a sort of posture that gives you sort of some sense of being alert. So back nice and straight but not straining, and when you're ready, if it feels okay for you, you can either soften your gaze or close your eyes. Usually by closing your eyes you're less distracted, but if you prefer you can just soften your gaze on some part of the carpet. And just spend a little bit of time beginning with noticing how you're sitting. What's it feel like to sit? So touch and pressure sensations on the body as the body makes contact with the chair, with the floor, with your clothes. The invitation is just to be aware of what's happening on the inside. So noticing maybe a certain sense of uplift through the spine, head balanced on the shoulders. Maybe also be aware of temperature sensations on the skin, as well as sounds. And once you've got a general sense of what you're experiencing, the invitation now is to start gently redirecting your attention from where it is to the top of your head and scalp. Just starting to tune in any sensations on that part of your body. Starting to narrow and focus your attention to sensations of maybe itching or tingling or other sensations. Letting thoughts drift into the background while in the foreground you're just observing this part of the body and just noticing what you can feel. Bring a sense of kindness and curiosity to this part of the body. Once you feel you've got a general idea of what's going on there, you're sort of aware of what this part of the body is experiencing, the invitation now is to just start gently shifting your attention to your forehead. Getting a sense of what's going on there. So maybe noticing how the skin is stretching across your forehead. Other sensations, maybe some tingling or itching or achiness. Sometimes it's hard to know exactly what's going on there, but you may get a general sense of how it feels in this part of the body. Okay, just observing these sensations from moment to moment, how they feel. When you're ready now, dropping attention down to the eyebrows and the eyes. So how do the eyes feel? Sometimes you'll notice where the eyes feel heavy or sleepy, or other sensations. Perhaps noticing a difference between the left eye and the right eye. Ready, letting go of the eyes and moving down to the face, the cheeks, the nose and the mouth. Noticing your lips. Perhaps even noticing whether you're holding a particular expression in your face or whether the jaw is tight. If the jaw is tight, it's perfectly okay just to release any tension. Let the jaw go slack. Now moving from where you're focusing to the neck and throat, actually arriving at the shoulders. If you notice your mind's wandering from time to time to thoughts, daydreams or somewhere else, that's okay. Just notice it's wandered off. It's not a mistake or a failure. Just notice where your mind's wandered off to and just gently redirecting your attention back to where you're focusing. Mind wandering is not a mistake. We're just noticing how the mind wanders and just gently redirecting our attention back to where we're focusing. So what are the shoulders like now? Checking out this part of your body. Sometimes you may notice sensations on the surface or deeper down. Some achiness or stiffness. As best you can, just opening and softening to those sensations. Bring a sense of kindness and curiosity to this part of the body. And ready, moving down to the chest. As you start to focus on this part of the body, you may become aware of the rib region, the ribs and the lungs expanding and contracting as you breathe in and breathe out. Just feeling those sensations for the full duration of the in-breath and the full duration of the out-breath. And when you're ready, dropping down to the belly and the abdominal region. So moving away from the chest now down to the belly. As you start to switch in or tune into this part of the body, you'll notice that you can feel the breath properly as the belly expands on the in-breath and contracts on the out-breath. As best you can, staying with these sensations. And just noticing when the mind wanders, where it's wandered off to.